The problem with sitting down with people and going through what they eat is it's not like they accurately recorded it anyway. It's such a difficult conversation because one of the things that we're taught in nutrition is that everybody lies.
I probably say I'd get this from 99% of the clients that I get in. And that is, I'm sticking to the diet, but my weight isn't dropping. What should I do? Like, the usual question is, should I drop my calories?
I'm happy to be wrong about that if we discover something later on down the line. I'm not attached to it. But what I'm saying is, from what we understand right now about weight loss is... All right. Welcome back. Confessions of a Personal Trainer podcast. I'm your host, Mus Ali, and I'm joined today by one of our previous guests, Ryan Anderson. Ryan, what's up?
What's going on, Mus? Pleasure to be here, man.
Nice to have you. All right, so Q&A series, we did this last time. Still quite new with this whole sort of format and setup, but definitely wanted to do some more training related content. I've know we had a lot of conversations that have got nothing to do with training, so I want to make this series where I'm teaming up with other coaches to answer very common questions. Some of them are going to be the ones that come from our own clients, and some of them are just going to be ones that we've just generally come across over time, or that we see maybe out there on the internet that are worth clearing up. But Ryan's going to join me today and help me answer some of those questions. All right, so we will kick off with question number one. So I've got this guy. You know what? He's actually not a client of mine. He's about to become a client of mine. So the early stages are always really interesting with somebody because they're kind of coming in. They're very raw. They're very green. They've got all of their sort of pre-ideas that they walk in with, and a lot of them you're kind of just like face palming yourself, right? You're like, okay, this is going to take a lot of work because you've got to kind of completely unpack and deprogram where they're at and then kind of rebuild that understanding from scratch. But the first bit is, undoing all like the learning that that they've already had, especially if it's stuff. Some of it's going to be good. A lot of it is actually stuff that's kind of been getting in their way, and you can see that. This guy is actually quite interesting because he's a former client of Ultimate Performance.
No, no way. I might know him.
I think I did actually ask him who his trainer was, and
Okay.
I don't remember the name. He didn't say.
Probably not anyway, but there's loads of clients of UP, but
thousands by this point,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So he's just one of those people who has like a million questions, which I always find interesting when I have a client who comes and they've had previous trainers and they ask millions of questions. I'm like, why didn't your previous trainer like answer these questions for you, or why didn't they help you create clarity? And so I think that's one of the things that's often missing is that trainers they do a good job the actual running the session and training the person. Sometimes they fall short in actually helping them develop an understanding. But I'm not going to mention this guy's name. This is all anonymous. He doesn't even know he's featuring on the show, but I'll let him know afterwards. And he had a million questions, but I'm just going to go with the one that kind of got the biggest reaction from me, actually. I was just like, I remember sitting around saying to him, you would be very good in a court of law, because he was almost putting words into my mouth. So his question was along the lines of, how many exercises should I do in 60 minutes? Brian, what would you say to that?
Oh, that is a loaded question. There are a few factors, and I'm sure when you ask these questions, there's an idea of like talking through this, right? Because there are so many different ways to unpack this, and so many different ways to answer this, but I'm sure a lot of these questions are going to start off with "it depends," and that is the same with this particular question, definitely. So it depends on what the goals are. I would say, is this in a context of just he's trying to lose body fat, but he's trying to maintain muscle mass or build muscle mass at the same time?
So I'll give you the context of
Okay.
the guy is he's your typical guy, right? He wants to basically look, he wants to gain muscle. He also does, he also wants to be lean. So I want to have a muscular, lean, six pack physique, the magazine physique, right?
Yeah.
That's
the UP package.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your standard UP customer.
Okay, cool. All right. And again, I just want to bring more context to this. So assuming he's training probably 3 times a week, maybe.
Oh, this guy told me he goes to the gym 7 times a week.
Oh, 7 times a week. Wow. Okay. If we're speaking about that particular scenario, the biggest limiting factor for somebody training 7 days a week is going to be his recovery. So with that in mind, I'm going to say we're leaning towards a minimal effective dose with his training. We want to get better quality sets within his session. If you're training 7 days a week, wow. I remember one time I actually tried training 7 days a week. It was actually when I was at UP myself, and I wasn't too clued up about obviously recovery, and I just knew deadlifts, squats, bench press, do them heavy, build muscle. So I had a mentor there, and I told them about my plan. I think it was 6 sessions per week, and I was like, right, I figured it out. This is my training plan for the week. 6 days per week. Monday and I think Thursday, deadlifts. Tuesday, Friday, squats. Wednesday, Saturday, it's going to be bench press. I'll do them heavy. I had all this planned out. And then I put it to my mentor. And he was like, try it out. I tried it. I probably lasted 2 weeks before I think I actually genuinely started getting ill. I think I was pushing so hard, trying to go to failure again, because that was the thing, heavy lifts, training hard, going to failure. And because obviously busy work environment, my sleep wasn't the greatest. I don't know if I was in a dieting phase at that point, which I'm sure that your client probably is as well. So the calories are low. I remember just being in a hole after 2 or 3 weeks. I was ill. I was just tired. I was like, wow, this definitely isn't working. So that's something to consider. I'm glad that he told me to do it, because I learned the hard way that recovery is probably your biggest limiting factor when you're trying to train 6 or 7 times per week. So to answer your question with that in mind, if you're training 7 days a week, I would probably have your volume on the lower side. And by volume, I mean the total amount of sets and exercises you do compared to before. And because you're going to be getting so much volume across the week anyway, training 7 times a week, spreading that evenly across the 7 days. So instead of doing, for example, 6 to 8 exercises, which people typically do, I'd probably lean towards maybe 4 to 5 exercises and stick to the lower side of the sets per exercise. I realize that is a very arbitrary number.
I suppose I'd then ask you, give an example session, 60 minutes, 4 exercises.
Yep.
What would those exercises be, and what parts of the body were we kind of like looking at?
Yeah, that's a very good point as well. Well, ideally, so what I know from now is that if you're trying to build muscle or maintain muscle mass when you're in a calorie deficit, you can still obviously build muscle in certain circumstances. You want to increase your frequency. So be hitting each muscle group 2 to 3 times per week. So what did you ask? Sorry, what the actual sessions look like?
Yeah, so like give an example session.
Yes. Okay. So I would say, sorry, the split across the week. If you're adamant you're doing 7 days a week, I would probably, from the top of my head, go for a push, pull, legs kind of split with maybe abs in the middle, and then go for push, pull, legs, push, push, pull, legs, core, or something like that, with a bit of cardio, with push, pull, legs again. So that's your 7 days per week. We can go into the actual training, the session itself, each session itself if you want, but that's probably the split I'd have across the week.
I like that. I think obviously we've already established that 7 days a week is not the most practical strategy.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is what practical and optimal on paper doesn't always line up with a person's psychology, so where they're at in their own headspace. And for somebody who's going to the gym 7 days a week, it's very rarely just about I'm trying to do the most training to, get the best outcome. Getting to the gym every day is a big part of their own, perhaps, self-care routine. It's how they regulate themselves. It's how they kind of take a break from their life. So the reason they're going so frequently isn't just about training. It's usually something that allows them to cope with the stress of their life. So if you then suddenly turn around and say, well, I'm going to ask you to stop going 7 days a week, I'm only going to want you to go 3 days a week, the other 4 days, they don't have something that replaces that activity mentally that has a negative impact on them. So in a way, whilst it's not the most practical thing to do, our job is to kind of respect that that's where that person is at and come up with the most suitable strategy that's not going to run that person into the ground, but also kind of tick their boxes that they turned up and they still felt like they did something that was practical and taking them towards their outcome without massively shining a light on the fact that they're kind of there because it's a distraction from dealing with some discomfort elsewhere. So I like your push, pull, legs with a break in the middle and then repeating that, because you can easily just do there's multiple exercises within each of those categories. So if we were just looking at the pull session, give us an example of what one of those pull sessions looks like.
A pull session, a typical pull session, I would say for this person would be maybe starting off with some RDLs. Again, when I'm thinking of this at the top of my head, there is a few factors that need to be involved, that I need to think about, because, for example, when you do a pull session and you do an RDL, some legs are involved as well. So you might get some fatigue or soreness or essentially some hamstring work, which may carry over into your leg day. But from the top of my head, I would typically plan a pull day with some form of hip hinging movement, like an RDL, maybe a trap bar. If the client is able to do it, a deadlift, or maybe even a rack pull of some sort. So a heavy compound. My next exercise would be something like a lat pull down for 2 to 3 sets. All of these exercises having 2 to 3 sets. Some form of bicep variation, and probably a couple of bicep variations. Again, I'm going to consider the fact that this guy's training every single day, so I'm gonna gear towards the lower end of heavy or big movements, especially if they're training pull again later in the week as well. So that's probably something like that, I would say. I think it's also important to recognize that when you're just starting out with a client and you're building some form of program, this initial program, for example, is just your best guess for how things would go. And after a couple of weeks or maybe even 1 week, you can get an idea of how things are going for them, if they went through it faster, if they need to work on certain areas, if they recovered well, if they can handle more volume. So yeah, it's important to note that, especially for me, I just start off with the best guess in regards to volume and training and even exercise programming, and then adjust it along the way. I don't think you can get it perfect straight away. Maybe, but yeah, I don't think you can ever get it perfect. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. I think the idea of a program isn't to be perfect. It's just meant to be a guiding structure that is like it complements the main thing, and the main thing is always consistent effort. If we can get someone to consistently act over a long enough period of time, the little nuances and tweaks that we make with the programming to make sure that we're getting the most out of their effort. But it's how do I keep somebody going for a long time?
Yes.
That's ultimately when we're going to start to see like real results. And what I tend to find is somebody that comes in, like I said, he hasn't really worked with me yet, so we just had a couple conversations, and it's the idea of him doing 7 days a week. As you start working with him, he'll start to realize why that might not necessarily be the best idea. And the thing that, you know, I have the benefit of context here is knowing that I know how hard he works in each session, and he hasn't got a real sense of intensity just yet.
Yeah.
So that's why he's able to turn up every day, right?
Yeah.
Because there's actually not a huge recovery demand needed, because he's never pushing himself that hard. The range of motion in the exercises isn't to the level that it could be. He's counting his sort of like warm-up sets as actual sets. So he hasn't been able to figure out what are working sets yet versus what are just like the warm-up sets. The way I break down sets to people is we have like your first round, like what I call a practice round, a stroke mobility round, right? So it's not a heavy weight, it's just something that is a light enough weight for you to practice the movement, mentally engage the cues that you need for that exercise. And it also serves to start priming the nervous system to open up those joints and those parts of the body to increase that range of motion. Then we have the build-up round. The build-up round is a moderately heavier round. Now we're starting to get your muscles firing a little bit more. We want to increase force production, get ready for our actual working sets. Now, by the time you've had your practice mobility round, by the time you've had your build-up round, your body is now fully primed to go do some like pretty hard stuff. And at that point, we've hopefully already established what your working weights are, and we're looking to be either match that or be a little bit progressive depending on, you know, how you've turned up that day. If you're at 100%, or if you're at 60%, then it's just a case of maintaining or whatever. So yeah, people understanding that your first warm-up round doesn't actually count as a working set, I think that's massively overlooked. I see a lot of people, I use an app that I think the same one you probably use, and sometimes I see people putting in their warm-up sets as the main set, and then so by the time they've got to the third round, they've basically only done one working set instead of the three that I've programmed in for them. So
yeah,
having those conversations, just getting people clear on what are working sets and what are just warm-up sets is quite important to help them establish, so that they end up working hard enough.
Yeah,
not just doing one working set. But yeah, if you are doing one working set, yeah, you might be able to train 7 days a week.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
All right, cool. That was good. Quite happy with that. Let's move on. Ryan, what you got for me?
Yeah, so I've got a kind of universal question that I've had from one of my clients recently, but I probably say I'd get this from 99% of the clients that I get in. And that is, I'm sticking to the diet, but my weight isn't dropping. What should I do? Like the usual question is, should I drop my calories?
Huh. Oh man.
Yes,
I
dropped
do,
you in it there.
do you know what? Is the last episode we also covered a question very similar to this. But there was this very specific context to that question. And if you're listening to this right now and you wanna get a little bit more insight in other than what I'm about to say, feel free to go back and watch that episode with Mate. But yeah, nutrition and weight loss are they're much less straight. They're straightforward on paper. They're much less straightforward when we're dealing with people. And like I'm a fully qualified nutritionist, evidence-based. Spent almost 2 years studying, trying to get this very difficult qualification. This wasn't one of those that you could just pass. It actually had like I think a 75% pass rate, so like 25% of people actually fail this course.
Yeah.
Once I had done that, I made a decision I was never going to deal with nutrition because I learned a lot, and I learned the vastness of nutrition and weight loss. And it's a very people-orientated coaching style. So again, when people ask these questions, I'm almost always encouraged to look past the question itself and look straight at the person and be like, right, what's going on with you? So the technical answer is, if you are in what's very popularly known as a calorie deficit, which just means that the amount of energy or calories that you expend is greater than the amount that you consume through food and drink, you are in a deficit, and therefore the effect is that you will experience weight loss. May or may not come from, it will always come from body fat stores, but it will also come from other places as well. So there's that. Now, I think everybody kind of understands that at this point. There is a little bit of confusion because you get people out there claiming that calories don't matter, or that it's some other mechanism in your body. It's there's not to say hormones don't play a role, but they certainly don't override you being in a calorie deficit. Almost nothing does from what we understand at this point. I'm happy to be wrong about that. If we discover something later on down the line, I'm not attached to it. But what I'm saying is, from what we understand right now about weight loss, is a calorie deficit is required. So that only leaves us with one possible answer now, doesn't it, my friend? If you are not losing weight, it's because you're not in a calorie deficit. And so our next practical task is to unpack and figure out what it is that you're doing that is not putting you into a deficit. Is it that you're misjudging the portions of food that you're eating? Is it that you're overlooking food that you're consuming that wasn't necessarily planned for you to consume, and you've kind of mentally blocked it out? Is there an activity factor? Have you started moving around a lot less? I know for a fact doing this podcast means that I spend a lot more time on my computer editing. My activity level certainly has dropped, and even if my food doesn't change, I'm naturally going to experience weight gain just as a result of my activity levels dropping. So, there's two super obvious places for us to look. Is one, how active are you, and has that changed? Two, are you unknowingly consuming more than you realize you are? So the problem with sitting down with people and going through what they eat is it's not like they accurately recorded it anyway. It's such a difficult conversation because one of the things that we're taught in nutrition is that everybody lies. And one of the examples of that is the fact that when they studied like actual registered dietitians, right? So we're talking about full-on nutrition professionals at medical level, they were themselves underreporting their calorie intake by up to 150 calories. So we're talking about people that would have the highest chance of getting it right, the highest chance of being accurate, and they still had 150 calorie margin of error. I myself, as a two-decade-long professional with like an extremely high amount of experience using apps like MyFitnessPal, tracking, weighing, measuring, not just with my staff, but literally dozens and dozens of other people, I still factor in up to 200 calories worth of a margin of error for myself. So whatever, if I use MyFitnessPal, for example, and it says on there that I've had 2,250 calories on average, I round that up to 2,500. Sometimes that works against me because I am shockingly accurate. And then I'm like, why am I losing so much weight? And then it's like, yeah, because actually I am being way more on point than the average person is. But that would be my sort of like hack, so to speak, is factor in a margin of error if you're using strategies like tracking. If you're not using a strategy like tracking, then it's so vague as to what you're eating. You see, I eat the same things every day. I have this for breakfast, and I have this for lunch, and I have this for dinner, and then sometimes I'll have this as a snack. Like, it's very loose, and I can't really pay that much attention to that person's actual diet because, quite frankly, there's just not enough clear data on it. So I'm going to have to focus on that person and their behavior and where they're at and what they're up to. And there's always this weirdly clear difference between somebody who's got a great deal of focus versus somebody who hasn't. And you can kind of just feel it from them. And I've had people where it's the same person, but I've got them when they're focused, and then I've got them when they're not really focused. The outcomes are completely different. So the conversation of paying attention to how focused that person is. Are they in a place right now in their lives to be focused? Helping them get that self-awareness and then allowing them to give themselves a break, because life is hard enough. You're trying your best. There's only so much weight that we can carry. I don't blame you for not being massively focused on this task right now. Just pat on the back for the fact that you're continuing to try and keep going. And so it becomes a lot more about softening and empathy, and that allows that person to just continue being consistent with their process until they do get around to a space in their life where they can be focused and power through and accurately track everything. So recognizing when you're actually in a place to be focused, and recognizing when you've maybe got a little bit too much on your plate, needing to be a bit more forgiving with yourself. And then sort of reframing the goal, and it not being, this period myself where I know I can be on point with being in a calorie deficit, and I can't just do it at any given moment in time. I know there's times in my life where it's just not going to work out, I'm going to get to the evening, I'm going to get to the weekend, life's been a bit too much, I'm just going to be like, whatever. And, I'll overconsume relative to the calories that I was supposed to eat. And then there's times where I know I can be pretty solid for a stretch of 8, 12 weeks or whatever. And then I'll go for it. But I'm going to be massively honest with myself every time. And I'm going to manage my own expectations. And I would encourage anybody else to do the same.
Nice.
So I don't know if that really answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does. And you bring up some, I mean, you made a really good point of, on paper, it's just a number you're trying to hit. But there is so much behind the behavior that goes towards reaching that number, which is the biggest problem. And I've definitely noticed as well that when a client's not in a place where they're showing themselves compassion, or they're kind of judging themselves for not being able to stick to it, they kind of just blind themselves to the behaviors that they're doing, and it makes it very difficult to move on from that when you have that self-judgment and you're not giving yourself that kind of leeway, and you're not giving yourself that time to kind of just get on with life, just get through life and then get back to it. What was that? What did you mention you learned about in your course that said something about lying?
Everybody lies.
Everybody lies.
I mean, it's more of a subjective observation.
Yeah.
I did a course with a gentleman named Martin McDonald, who runs a company called Mac Nutrition. So he's obviously, he's a nutritionist. He's worked with like professional sports teams. He's worked with big companies. He's just like quite well known within the sort of nutrition space as a evidence-based practitioner. He's got a bit of a personality as well, so I think that's probably one of the reasons why he's got some notoriety as well. And he's very sort of straightforward and straight to the point, and quite realistic with the reality of working with people in nutrition. And where by the time I've gone to do that course, I've maybe already been, a personal trainer for like about 15 years at that point. I must have done my course like 5 years ago. And so some of those things resonated heavily with me because I'd already had enough experience with people to know that they come at you with, I've been doing this, I've been doing that, and it's still not happening, and then you're just there racking your brain well, how am I getting it wrong, right?
Yes.
And often, and then later on down the line, I've learned that those people weren't actually being entirely honest, or they've been on nights out and this and that, and they didn't tell you about it, and it's not malicious lying. A lot of lying is sometimes it just comes from a place of somebody trying to, cope with something, or they're trying to make themselves feel safe. They're afraid of your judgment. They're just expressing frustration at that moment in time. And as a coach, you're really just not trying to be reactive to the fact that you're lying to me, I don't trust you, I don't believe you. It's just like a child, right? You know that they're lying. And what they need in that moment is compassion from you and support, and they'll keep going. They will keep going 100% because they know, right? And if they don't want to tell you, they don't want to tell you. That's fine.
Yeah.
But they just need to know somebody's there, that's like looking over them, looking after the situation, and is there to kind of catch them when they fall. And it doesn't feel great for us, 100%. And I don't like being lied to, and I don't like dealing with people's frustrations. But I kind of also recognize what my role is in that situation. And, I don't actually deal with it that way every single time. No way. You can ask any one of my clients. I can be quite reactive. I can suddenly fly off the handle. I can start giving them a lecture. Even now, 2 decades later, that's got less to do with my experience as a trainer and more just my own personal development as a human being.
Yeah.
I'm not this perfectly calm center of the world at any given moment in time. I will come at you. I will be sarcastic. So, you know, it's not, they kind of get a little bit of heat from me as well.
Yeah.
But I always, I'm aware enough to know what my job is, even when I'm not doing it. But yeah, everybody, that statement, everybody lies, is always your best bet when something isn't adding up.
Yeah.
I also learned that in doing hostage negotiation course. So a lady named Kathy McDonald, who is ex Scotland Yard hostage negotiator, and she ran a communications course specifically for personal trainers. That was a life-changing course for me. And we had to do these role plays. I got put in front of this guy who was exactly that. You know, I've been doing everything you're telling me to do, you know, and I'm turning up, I'm doing things, I'm doing all the tasks, and it's still not working. Like, this isn't good enough. Well, and I was sitting there frustrated. I didn't know where to go with any of it.
Yeah.
And then they had to kind of just stop me and be like, look, this is how you need to deal with it. If you know that you've done everything you can and everything that you're doing does work and it has worked with others, basically at that point in time, you need to know that this person is coming from a place of frustration. So first off, you look after yourself, you set your boundaries, you stand your ground and be like, look, the strategies that we put in place to help you, 100% they do work. So we're reaffirming what we've already established.
Yeah.
If they're not working, we need to look at what you're not doing. And at that point, there were other hostage negotiators that were playing the roles. Guy was like, to be honest with you, this has been going on and that's been going on. So some of all these confessions started coming out. And so that's like the assumed response when you kind of stand your ground a little bit. Yeah. And then that's when the empathy and the compassion and everything from you needs to really be very, very present. Definitely not judgment and being like, see, I told you. And so you were trying to talk to, like none of that. Just listening, patience, understanding, being like, okay, should we try this again? Yeah, let's do it. And that's great in a role play scenario. It's great in the way that I've just described it there. It doesn't always go like that, but yeah, read between the lines. Probably your best bet. And for the people that are in a coaching process with a coach, just keep doing your best. It's not meant to go to plan, and it's not meant to be this easy, straightforward thing. And I know when you look around, it looks like everybody else is doing it easier than you. And I can tell you right now, they're not. I'm not. Ryan's not. It's just challenging for everybody. We're human beings. We're not supposed to be in this constantly semi-starved state. You're not going to be performing at your best. You're not going to be the best version of yourself, physically or mentally. And you have to give yourself a break on that and give yourself some space and some compassion. And if you're consistent for a long enough period of time, i.e. you regularly showing up on a weekly basis with a few slip-ups here and there, yeah, you're going to get to where you're going. And you also might discover somewhere along the way that the weight loss you were trying to achieve didn't quite hold the value that you thought it did. And maybe you were just like perfectly good just as you were, and learning to accept yourself, and then finding a way to enjoy eating well and enjoy getting stronger and getting fitter, rather than attaching your self-worth to it, might be a better shout.
Very well put, man. Very well put. And you said you touched on so many good points. And I want to kind of highlight the fact that I think when they're given this figure, this number, calories, and the calorie calculator, it looks straightforward. And they think that everybody else is going to find this easy. But on a day-to-day, it's actually hard. And I think going in with this expectation of, oh yeah, it's just simple, and then failing at it makes them think like, why am I incapable of doing this simple thing? And that makes it difficult because they don't want to be honest with their coach. It makes it difficult for them to work around these situations which they're kind of struggling with. So that makes perfect sense. And this actually was one of my biggest bafflers of my career, not understanding that people lied. Like, obviously they have their reasons, and I'm not judging them for lying. Like, it is what it is. I try my best to just be upfront with them and just serve them. I say, be like, look, the calories aren't being stuck to. We need to dig deeper if you want to progress forward. Like, when you feel comfortable enough to share things with me, let's work through it. Let's work around it. Let's find out what's going on. I just tell them that straight up. But before, when I gave the plan and they weren't sticking to it and the weight wasn't dropping, it was a case of like, what am I doing wrong? What's happening? Why isn't the calorie deficit working? Maybe it is their metabolism, because I couldn't get around the fact that somebody would look into my eyes and tell me I'm sticking to X and be lying to me. But whether it's unconscious or conscious decisions that are stopping them from losing, or stopping them from sticking to the targets or the plan that we set, the only reason they're ever going to not lose weight is because they're not sticking to a plan which has put them in a calorie deficit. So yeah, just to kind of build on what you said and answer the question to which I asked you, it's always going to come around to a calorie deficit, right? And there's like, you gave a great, you gave an example of you not being able to stick to a calorie deficit at times. Health professionals not being able to stick to a calorie deficit or accurately measuring their calories. I've been in tons of situations myself where I've been like, oh, didn't track that. And some of the trainers that I've worked with in the best personal training company in the world, they've all made these mistakes. So the chances of you making these mistakes as well is going to be highly probable.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Man, that was good. That was good. We managed to get a question in each, and hopefully there's something in there that someone's gonna hear and help them understand things a little bit better and help them along their journey of whatever their goal is, whether it's trying to fit in as much training as they can in 60 minutes, or whether it's losing weight or sticking to their calories. But for now, we'll call it there. Thank you so much for coming on, Ryan. Where can people find you?
It's my pleasure. And people can find me mainly on Instagram. I go by Transcending Ryan. And yeah, just hit me up there if you have any questions.
Cool. We'll drop that in the description, and links and all the rest of it. All right. Cool. For now, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.